So there's been a lot of talk online recently about how language models or AI models like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Perplexity recommend brands. So when you go and type in a question in ChatGPT, like what's the best restaurant near me, or what is the best hiking shoe to buy? How does it decide which brands to show you? And so this is important for a brand themselves to know, because then if they understand how these models determine which brands to show, they can influence that and they can show up a lot more. So I've been in this space for a long time, and I've sort of studied how these models work and how they use the internet and give you recommendations. And I've written a blog post as well about this, but I wanted to create like a visual guide here as well and explain how this works. So the first thing is to understand how these language models work in the first place. So without going into all the technical details, models like ChatGPT, or rather GPT models that power ChatGPT, are trained on a massive corpus of data. And let's just talk about text only for now. All the text on the internet, or most of the text on the internet, and of course OpenAI and all these big companies are going to deny that they scraped all these websites, but there are plenty of websites with text, and they basically scrape all of that. They scrape blogs, they scrape news websites, they scrape Wikipedia and Reddit and so on and so forth, and train the models on all of this data. Now, what the model is doing really is it's creating a sort of world model of all these words, essentially, right? And it's created sort of associations and mappings. So the word sky is associated heavily with the word blue, because in a lot of the text examples online, the phrase the sky is blue, or I stared at the bright blue sky, or whatever, shows up in the data. And so sky and blue are very closely related in the training data. So when you ask the model what color is the sky, it's going to say blue. Conversely, if you switched all the training data from the word blue to green, it would say the sky is green, even though the sky is still actually blue. We haven't changed physics. We haven't changed the actual color of the sky. We just changed the training data, and now it's going to say green because that's how it associates sky now in its training data. So it's kind of like word associations. I'm obviously dumbing it down a lot, but it's word associations on a massive, massive scale. So when you ask a question to ChatGPT, there's two ways it can answer you. It either uses web search or it doesn't. And it depends on what kind of question you ask. If you ask it a question that is in general sort of like always the same answer, like what color is the sky, it doesn't need to Google that, or it doesn't need to use web search. It can just answer it based on its training data. The sky is typically blue, right? So it's got all of this information already in its weights, in its sort of neurons and weights, and it kind of just answers based on sort of the probability of the answer. The second way, of course, is using web search, in which case, when you ask a question, it determines that it requires the use of the internet to get you the latest and greatest answer. And so it runs a web search. ChatGPT uses Bing API, and Perplexity uses Google. But it basically runs a search, gathers results from all the search results, and then sort of like combines it with its base knowledge and gives you an answer based on that. So it basically combines like sources from the internet and then gives you an answer. So let's look at some practical examples. And in this case, I saw someone talk about this on LinkedIn, and they used AI SDR tools, and I wanted to replicate the results. So in this case, I'm asking ChatGPT, can you create a list of AI SDR tools? And so here it does, like, this is not using web search. So it's kind of determined on its own that it has enough internal knowledge that it doesn't need web search, and automatically just created a list of tools. And you can see here, Reggie, Humantic, Line, Outbound, SmartWriter. Remember these names, right? I'm going to show you right now what it looks like with web search on. So here's the exact same prompt, but I've selected search on over here, as you can see. And you'll see the list here is completely different. Persona, Agent Frank, Meet Chase, and a bunch of others. So what that's telling us is that without web search, in its pre-trained knowledge, the phrase AI SDR was heavily associated with a certain number of brands that it showed up without the web search. And so those brands are already in the training data. And when the model was trained, it created these word associations with AI SDR. And it's because those brands heavily use that term or similar terms on their website, in blog posts, and other blog posts have covered them. That's also in the training data and have listed them as kind of, brands. This number is wrong. I should have changed that. Sorry. But it's basically pre-training data. The cutoff date is usually like late 2024 or early 2025, and we're in sort of mid 25. And so every maybe 6 months, these models are updated with newer training data. And so if you're a brand new company or a brand new product, or you've released some brand new stuff, you're not going to show up in the training data because it is past that cutoff date. Now, on the other hand, if you are showing up on web search, it's because it's using kind of the Bing or Google API to get results. And I'm going to show you actually where these results are coming from. So you scroll down here, you can see sources when it does a web search. If you click on the sources, you'll see where it's picking up these sources from. Now, the first thing you should note here is all of these sources are very recent. So we're in July, the first week of July 2025. This is coming from late May, June, May, April. So it's kind of like in the last 2 to 3 months, basically, is what ChatGPT is looking for. So when I asked it this question, it went and searched for AI SDR tools, but it limits itself to like the very latest ones available, or not available, but the content in the last 2 to 3 months, so that it's the freshest content. And so what that means for you as a brand, if you are worried about having missed the training cutoff date and not being in a model's internal knowledge, it's okay, because a lot of people do tend to use web search, or some, like the models often tend to use web search if they're looking for specific like products and stuff. So they kind of will be using this, and which means you can get mentioned by ChatGPT if you have created content that's recent and that's showing up on Bing or Google, which is really just like really good SEO, but also recency. So you have to be creating content consistently, and content specifically around these kind of product questions, these bottom of funnel, mid funnel questions that people are asking specifically around softwares or products or things to buy or services and stuff. So if you're doing that consistently and you've got fresh content, ChatGPT is going to pick it up because it is looking for fresh content related to that. So for you as a brand, yes, try to get into the training data by creating, like associating your brand with these concepts and phrases and keywords. It doesn't mean you have to like do the keyword stuffing stuff like you did with normal SEO. But if your brand is associated with words like that or semantically similar, then your brand does show up in sort of the word associations of a model's training data. And if not, it's okay. You can still get on there by creating fresh content, especially fresh middle and bottom funnel content, even fresh top of funnel content. So if there's a topic in your industry that's brand new, and people are asking about that. So for example, on my blog, I've written a post on how to build agents with Google's Agent Development Kit, which was very recently announced. So it's not in the training data for most models. So when people ask ChatGPT about it, ChatGPT is forced to do a search because it doesn't have training data on it. And so my blog post comes up because I've written something on it and it's very recent. So if you want to show up for any kind of question, create content around that question and create in the last couple of months so that you show up in the results here. And of course, content is not the only thing. Obviously, it's a big pillar of it. But if you still do like the regular technical SEO stuff, and you're continuously monitoring and seeing how you show up in these AI models, and you sort of continuously create fresh content, and not just on your blog, maybe try to get content on other blogs on websites like Reddit, where they do pull during the web search, then your brand is more likely to get picked up there as well.